Madam President and friends, it's an absolute privilege to be invited to speak to you on the occasion of the 60th anniversary of the founding of the Union of Students. So let me tell you what it was like. Sorry, can you hear me? Right. What it was like when I arrived here in 1966, which I suppose was year 2 in terms of the Union. The university at that time was a small number of buildings on 2 sites at opposite ends of the large campus you've got here today. When I was president, I often had to go and see the then Vice-Chancellor, Jack Butterworth, who had in his office a very grand and impressive model of what the university would look like when it was fully built out. I rather wonder if what you've actually got here at Warwick today, though on a grand scale, is really very close to this model that he had. The first architects of the university was a firm called York, Rosenberg and Mardell. And I remember Rosenberg coming to speak at a student union meeting in, it must have been 1967, and getting a pretty hostile reception. The questions were partly about the poor standard of soundproofing of the accommodation, not his fault, I guess, but also why the white tiles were falling off the library building. Now, the great architectural feature of the early buildings was the white tiled facade. So Warwick was said to be a white tile rather than a red brick university. But within a year, a lot of the tiles had fallen off. Having a nostalgic walk today around the university, I see that some of the tiling from the 1960s actually survived, which is great. Some is covered by cladding. I struggled to pick out the buildings that were here in 1966. Some of them, I conclude, are gone. Some of the artwork is still here, which I always thought was very attractive. Now, the first president of the Union of Students was a very pleasant economics undergraduate called Mike Kostreva. Mike had a reputation of turning up late to student unions meetings or sometimes not turning up at all. So after a few months, there was the first instance of what became a quite regular feature every few months when I was at Warwick. And I don't know, Madam President, whether you're still plagued by this, but that was a motion of no confidence in the President of the Students' Union at one of our massive general meetings. So Mike perished. And in the early years, in fact, there was quite a rapid turnover of presidents. There was no sabbatical year, of course, so people did it for a while, got behind in their academic work, passed the mantle to somebody else. As you said, I was the 4th president in 1967. The first 4 presidents were all economics undergraduates, which led people to say, well, they were the only students who had time on their hands. You know, I don't know whether there's any economics undergraduates here who want to say, you know, well, nothing much changed, I think, over the years. Now, there were a number of big issues at the time. One of the big issues was whether there should be a students' union building. Most universities, of course, have a students' union building. All Warwick had in 1967 was Roots Hall, a social building run by and managed by university staff. And Jack Butterworth, the Vice-Chancellor at that time, told me, and I remember him telling one of our student union meetings, that he was adamantly opposed to the idea that there would ever be a student union building at the University of Warwick. And the reason he gave for this is that if there was such a building run by the student body, we might install a condom vending machine in the toilets. Now, this will seem an absolutely absurd argument to all of you. It was before the, you remember, the AIDS epidemic of the 1980s totally changed attitudes to safe sex, so that having access to a condom vending machine was then seen as a good thing. But in 1967, putting a condom vending machine in the toilets at a university was represented as encouraging the young to be promiscuous. Terrible, you know. The orthodoxy of those times was sex should only ever happen within marriage. Now, the 1960s were undoubtedly years of intense debate about social change, including debate about changing sexual mores, the permissive society. When the University of Kiel the Students' Union installed a condom vending machine in the toilets of the Student Union building in 1967, it led to tabloid newspaper headlines about encouraging university students to be promiscuous. Now, Butterworth was terrified of negative newspaper stories about the university, particularly in the tabloid press. you must remember that Coventry at that time was the international centre of the motor industry. Half the cars on the roads in Britain were manufactured in Coventry, or certainly in the West Midlands, you know, how the world has changed. And the university had big corporate sponsors that he was terrified of upsetting. So without wishing to refight political battles of 60 years ago, you've no idea how wonderful it is for me to be here. And there is a student union building, and I'm standing in it. And not only that, but I've been into the toilet, and there is a condom vending machine in the toilet. Actually, the way life works out, I come back here every 25 years. My daughter came here in the year 2000 to read sociology, and she told me there's a condom vending machine in the ladies' toilet as well. So there we are. So look, you know, Jack, you're up there in heaven, I know, looking down at us, aren't you? And Jack, at some point in the last 60 years, you lost. Okay. Now, more seriously, the idea that corporate sponsorship by the titans of British industry was somehow distorting the academic purposes of the university was actually a theme of the time. And in 1970, I was still at the university in 1970 doing postgraduate work. This book was published. I don't know if you haven't seen that. Warwick University Limited, which was written by Professor E.P. Thompson, who's a professor of history here and very famous intellectual on the political left, arguing that closeness to local capitalist industry was somehow undermining the ideals of the university. I don't know if there's an argument that perhaps resurfaces from time to time. In 1966, the university only had about 900 students. I've been told that today it has 37,000 students, so it's a bit different. But actually, I must say that there was a great sense of forging new traditions and building the future. Most of the decisions of the Students' Union at that time were taken in massive general meetings, at which it sometimes seemed to me every one of the 900 students had turned up. These were bear pits and very difficult to chair. And in my subsequent career, I always told people that everything I knew about chairing meetings came from chairing meetings of the general meetings of the University of Warwick Students' Union. Now, as I said, the 1960s were a time of great social change. In 1968, there was a brief but heady period of worldwide student-led demonstrations against the established order, led by students at the Sorbonne in France, and in the UK, yeah, the LSE was a bit involved, but mainly here at the University of Warwick. And in my time at the university, there were fairly regularly student sit-ins and other demonstrations about a wide variety of issues. Now, some books of contemporary history that I've read, talking about the 1960s, make particular mention of it being an era of the permissive society, sex, drugs and rock and roll, Bob Dylan, his famous song, The Times They Are Changing. Did they really change? I'm not sure. Demonstrations against the Vietnam War, some here at the university I remember taking part in. And you might conclude from that that it was a good time to be studying in the intellectual cauldron of a new university. Well, it was. It wasn't quite as good as I'm sort of making out, in that there was a bit of academic work that from time to time you had to do, which rather got in the way. But I should say, actually, I did want to say to you that from the very start, Warwick had an enormously high academic reputation. It has today an astonishingly high academic reputation. I think you should all know that. But from the outset, it attracted a clutch of professors with a very high reputation in their field. I could read you a list of names that would mean nothing to you, but they were famous in their time. And it was always the case that to get a place at the University of Warwick, whatever you were studying, you needed a string of A stars in your last year at school. So it was a great time to be at university, particularly a new university finding its way and forging traditions that I know you've built on in the last 60 years. So thank you so much for inviting me.